My name is Robert Calloway, and I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years walking into burning buildings for a living, and I thought that meant I knew what danger looked like before it came through the door. I was wrong. The most dangerous thing I ever faced didn't announce itself with smoke or heat or the sound of a structure giving way. It walked up to me on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in the shape of my own certainty. It started the morning my wife, Carol, told me she was driving up to Dayton to stay with our son and his wife. Our son Ethan had come down with something, she said. A bad flu, maybe worse. He needed his mother. I kissed her goodbye at the front door of our house in Columbus, watched her back her Buick out of the driveway, and went back inside to drink my coffee. That was on a Thursday. By the following Tuesday, something in my chest had been pulling tight for 2 days straight. Carol's calls had been getting shorter. Her voice had a quality I recognized from 30 years of marriage, a practiced evenness that meant something underneath was not even at all. I asked her twice if everything was fine. Both times, she said yes. Both times, the word landed a half-second too slow. On Tuesday morning, I got in my truck without calling ahead. I was going to surprise them. The drive from Columbus to Dayton is less than an hour. I spent most of it telling myself I was overreacting. Ethan was 36 years old. He had a good job in project management, a nice house in a quiet neighborhood near the university, a wife who kept the place looking like something out of a magazine. Serena. I spent the rest of the drive not thinking about Serena. I need to be honest about that, because everything that came after requires it. I had never liked my daughter-in-law, not from the first Sunday Ethan brought her to our house, when she walked in wearing heels on a backyard cookout day and shook my hand like she was closing a real estate deal. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what she did for a living. She was polished in a way that made me uncomfortable. She had answers for everything. She smiled at the right times, said the right things, remembered everyone's birthdays. It all felt too managed to me, too calculated. I watched her with my son, and I did not see a woman who loved him. I saw a woman who had selected him. Ethan was kind and quiet, and a little too trusting. And from the day they got engaged, I worried she knew that better than any of us. Carol thought I was being unfair. She said Serena was good for Ethan, that she steadied him, that I just didn't like her because she wasn't intimidated by me. That last part stung, because it was partly true. Serena looked at me like she had already taken my measure and decided the number was smaller than I thought it was. So, that is who I was when I pulled onto their street that Tuesday afternoon. A man with a head full of conclusions he'd been carrying for 4 years. Their house was the third one on the left, a 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters, and a maple tree in the front yard that was just starting to turn. I parked behind a car I didn't recognize, grabbed the paper bag of things Carol had asked me to send up with her and forgotten, and started up the front walk. I made it about 10 feet before the front door of the house next door flew open. A woman I had seen once or twice before came down her porch steps faster than I would have expected from someone her age. She was maybe 70, with close-cropped white hair and the direct, unhurried eyes of someone who had spent a career deciding things quickly. She put herself between me and my son's front door, with both arms slightly out, not quite blocking me, but close enough. "Don't go in there," she said. "Please, not yet." I stopped. "Excuse me?" I called 911 about 8 minutes ago. Her voice was steady, not panicked, not dramatic. The voice of a woman who had seen bad things and was telling me one was happening right now. Someone is going to be hurt if they aren't already. "You need to wait. That is my son's house," I said. "My wife is in there." "I know," she said. "That's exactly why I'm asking you to wait." I heard the sirens then, still a few blocks off, but getting closer fast. The woman, whose name I would learn was Margaret O'Shea, put her hand on my arm. Not grabbing, just contact, the way a nurse holds a patient who is about to do something they'll regret. "Let them handle the first 60 seconds, she said. "Then you can go in. I promise." I stood there on the sidewalk while 2 police cruisers turned onto the street. The officers moved up the walk with a focus that turned my stomach to ice. One of them knocked hard. "Police, open the door!" A pause. Then they were inside. What I found when I followed them in 30 seconds later put me on my knees on my son's hardwood floor. Carol was in the kitchen. She was sitting against the cabinets with her back against the lower cupboards, and her legs stretched out in front of her. There was blood on her forehead from a cut above her left eye. One of the officers was already kneeling beside her, pressing a folded kitchen towel to the wound. Her eyes were open. She looked confused and very small. My wife of 30 years sitting on a kitchen floor with blood drying in her gray hair, and the sight of it rearranged something inside me that I am not sure ever went fully back into place. "Carol," I said, getting down beside her. "Evie, I'm here. I'm right here." Yet she turned her head toward me, and something in her face shifted, a kind of relief mixed with something else I couldn't name yet. "Robert," she whispered. "You came. What happened?" I looked up at the officer. "What happened to my wife?" "Sir, paramedics are on the way. Please let us." "That is my wife. What happened?" The officer looked toward the living room. I followed her gaze. Ethan was sitting on the couch with his hands behind his back, and a second officer standing over him. My son. 36 years old. My blood. The boy I had coached in Little League and driven to swim practice at 5:30 in the morning for 4 years. He was staring at the floor. He didn't look up when I said his name. And Serena was standing near the stairs with her arms wrapped around herself, talking to a third officer in a low, rapid voice. There were red marks on her forearm that I could see from across the room. I knew immediately. I knew with the absolute certainty of a man who had already made up his mind 4 years ago and was simply watching the world confirm what he'd already decided. He was protecting her. My son was sitting there in handcuffs protecting the woman who had put my wife on the kitchen floor. "That's her," I said to the officer beside Carol, loud enough that I wasn't really saying it to the officer. "Whatever happened here, she's the one you need to be talking to." Serena looked over at me from across the room. Her expression was not what I expected. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It was just exhausted. The bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has been fighting a battle for a very long time, with no help and not enough sleep. And I mistook that exhaustion for guilt. They took Ethan in for questioning. They didn't arrest him, but they put him in a cruiser, and they took him. And I watched it happen from the driveway with my hands hanging at my sides. The paramedics got Carol onto a stretcher. The cut on her forehead needed stitches. She had a bruised wrist and a mild concussion. They loaded her into the ambulance, and I climbed in beside her, and I held her hand the whole way to the hospital. And every minute of that ride, I was building a case in my mind against Serena, like I was laying bricks. At the hospital, while a young doctor examined Carol, I stepped into the hallway. Margaret O'Shea was there. I hadn't noticed her follow us, but there she was, still wearing her house slippers, holding a paper cup of coffee she must have gotten from the machine down the hall. She handed it to me without asking if I wanted it. "You were going to tell me something," I said. "Yes," she said. "Tell me." She looked at me for a moment the way people look at you when they're deciding how much you can handle. "I'm a retired ER nurse," she said. 32 years at Miami Valley. I moved next door to your son and his wife about 2 years ago, and I need you to understand that what I'm going to say I'm saying because I believe your wife's safety depends on you hearing it correctly. She held my gaze. Not the way you want to hear it, the way it actually happened. I set the coffee down on the windowsill. Go ahead. The person in that house who has been dangerous, Margaret said carefully, is not Serena. I felt my jaw tighten. You don't know. Mr. Calloway. She said it quietly, but with a weight that stopped me. I am a woman who spent 32 years watching people come through emergency room doors. I know what a frightened looks like. I know what an angry one looks like. I know what someone looks like when they are managing a situation they are terrified of and doing it alone. She paused. That is what Serena has looked like for 2 years. Every single time I've seen her. My son, your son, is sick, she said. That is not an accusation. It is a medical observation from someone who watched this particular kind of sick for a very long time. I didn't say anything. I could hear it through my kitchen window on Sunday mornings, she said, his voice shaking. Not with anger, with need. I could see it on Tuesday evenings when he came home from work, the way he moved, the way he sat in the car for 10 minutes before he went inside. She looked down at her hands. I knocked on Serena's door 3 months ago. I told her what I suspected. She cried for 45 minutes at my kitchen table. She had known for almost 2 years, and she had been trying to handle it alone because she was terrified of what it would do to him if his family found out. The word family landed somewhere uncomfortable. I'm going to check on your wife, Margaret said. She picked up the coffee cup I'd set down and carried it away, and I stood alone in that hospital hallway, with the fluorescent lights humming, and my certainty starting to make a sound I didn't like. They released Carol the next morning with a prescription for pain medication and instructions to rest. I drove her back to the house she and I had lived in for 27 years, and I settled her on the couch and got her a glass of water and sat in the armchair across from her and waited. She slept most of that day. I didn't. Ethan called that evening. They'd let him go without charges. He was back at the house. His voice on the phone was flat and strange, like a recording of my son rather than my son. He said he was fine. He said it wasn't what I thought. He said he needed some time. I told him I'd be there tomorrow, and the call went quiet for a long moment before he said, okay. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I drove to Dayton. I didn't go to the house first. I went to a coffee shop near the university and sat at a corner table with my phone and did something I should have done before I ever started building that case in my head. I started looking. Serena's real estate license was active. I found her reviews online. Client after client. The same words. Patient. Honest. Went above and beyond. Helped us through a very difficult process. Not the reviews of a calculating woman. The reviews of someone people trusted when they were scared. Then I looked at something else. Ethan had mentioned once, 2 years ago, that he'd had back surgery. A disc problem from an old gym injury. He'd mentioned it the way you mentioned something minor, a footnote, and I had moved past it. I sat in that coffee shop and I thought about what Margaret had said. I thought about the way Ethan sounded on the phone. I thought about the Sunday mornings and the Tuesdays, and I thought about what comes after back surgery. What gets prescribed? What can happen when what gets prescribed begins to mean something it was never supposed to mean? I drove to the house. Serena answered the door. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked like a woman who had been expecting this particular conversation for a while and had decided she was finally done being afraid of it. Come in, she said. Ethan was not there. He was with a counselor, she told me voluntarily. That morning, for the first time in 18 months of her asking, he had agreed to go voluntarily. We sat at the kitchen table. The same kitchen where I had found Carol on the floor. Someone had scrubbed the tile. There was a candle burning near the window. Something with a clean smell. Lavender, maybe. like an attempt to replace the air. "I need you to understand something," Serena said. She was not looking for my approval. She was not performing anything. She just looked tired and honest and done. "I am not going to spend the next 10 minutes defending myself to you, but I am going to show you what the last 2 years looked like because your son loves you. And what happens next for him depends on whether you understand what actually happened in this house." She put her phone on the table and slid it toward me. There were bank statements, her bank statements. Withdrawals over 22 months, some of them small, some of them not small at all. A total that, when I added the numbers roughly in my head, sat somewhere above $40,000. All of it marked with notes she had typed to herself. First intake assessment, outpatient program deposit, aftercare sessions, prescription monitoring service, a relapse intervention specialist. Every line a door she had tried to open for him, every line paid for entirely by her. I looked up from the phone. "He didn't tell us," I said. I meant it as a statement, but it came out like a question. "He was ashamed," she said. "You are a man who walked into fires for 30 years. Do you understand what it felt like for him to be afraid of a pill? To need it the way he needed it? He would rather you think anything else about him than the truth." She paused. "And he knew what you thought of me." That landed exactly where it was aimed. "He never defended you to me," I said. It was the closest thing to an apology I was capable of at that moment. "I know," she said. "Because if he defended me, he'd have to explain why I was worried about him. And if he explained that, he'd have to tell you what he was hiding." She picked her phone back up. "I wasn't trying to manage you, Robert. I was trying to keep him alive long enough to let him want help. Those are not the same thing, but I understand why they might look the same from the outside." "Tuesday," I said. "What happened Tuesday?" She set her phone down again. "Your wife had been here since Thursday. I told her everything on Friday morning. I showed her everything I just showed you." She looked at the window. I thought she deserved to know. I thought maybe having her here would help him agree to something, a real program, somewhere he could stay. "She didn't tell me," I said. "She asked me for 4 days. She said she wanted to be the one to tell you. She wanted to figure out how to say it without Serena stopped. She was protecting both of you. She wanted to bring him to you whole, not broken. I think she thought she could get him into a program before you found out the rest." "The rest?" I repeated. She was quiet for a moment. "There's more?" I said. It was not a question. "I think," Serena said carefully, "you should ask Carol about the money." I drove back to Columbus that afternoon with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind very loud. Carol was awake when I got home. She was sitting up on the couch with the television on, a game show, the sound low. She looked better. The cut above her eye was covered with a small bandage. She looked at my face when I came in, and she turned the television off. "Serena told you," she said. "Serena showed me the bank statements," I said. "She showed me what she's been paying for. Then she told me to ask you about the money." Carol looked at her hands in her lap. She had the same expression she'd had in the hospital when I first came through the door. That mixture of relief and something else. "Sit down, Robert," she said. I sat. She told me about her first husband. I had known she was married before, briefly, in her early 20s, to a man named Dale, who died of cancer when she was 27. She had never talked about him much. I hadn't pushed. Some doors in a marriage you don't need to open. What I hadn't known was the life insurance. Dale had come from money, old money, the kind that accumulates quietly and doesn't announce itself. He had a policy that named Carol as beneficiary, a policy worth $420,000. She was 27 years old when she received it, terrified of it, convinced it would change her, or change the people around her, or attract the wrong kind of attention. She had hidden it in a separate account, one she opened under her maiden name, and she had never spent a cent of it, except for one thing. "Ethan," I said, "I found out about the pills 14 months ago," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "He called me in March of last year. He was crying. He told me he needed help, but he couldn't tell you. He said you would see it as weakness. He said he was afraid of what you would think of him. 14 months. My wife had known for 14 months. I sent him money," she said. "I thought I was helping. I thought if he had the money for a real program, he would go. He promised me he would go. 4 times he promised me." She pressed her lips together. "It took me almost 8 months to understand that I wasn't helping. I was making it easier for him to manage the visible parts while the rest got worse." "How much?" I said. $62,000, she said. The room was quiet for a long time. "He used almost none of it for treatment," she said. "I know that now. He used some of it, not enough. And the rest," she couldn't finish. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were steady and very sad. "Because I knew what you would do," she said. "You would have confronted him. You would have gone up there and looked him in the eye and demanded he be better than he was. And Robert, the version of better you would have demanded, would have broken him. You don't know how to let someone be broken in front of you. You never have." That hit me somewhere behind the sternum and stayed there. "I was going to tell you," she said. "I went up there Thursday to try one more time to get him into a real residential program. Serena had been telling me for months it needed to be residential. I thought if Carol was there in person, if I looked at him and asked him myself, he would go." She paused. "On Tuesday morning, Serena found a bag in the garage, pills that weren't prescribed to him anymore. He'd been getting them somewhere else. She confronted him. I was in the kitchen when she did. She touched the bandage above her eye. Not unconsciously. Very consciously. He wasn't trying to hurt me," she said. "I want you to understand that. He was trying to get past me to get out the door. I stepped in the way. He pushed me and I fell against the counter." She looked at me steadily. It was not a targeted act. He was panicking. He didn't even know I was there in the way until after. "That's still I started. I know what it is," she said. "I know. I'm not excusing it. I'm explaining it. There's a difference." I thought about something Margaret had said at the hospital. I know what a frightened person looks like. "Serena called 911, Carol said. That's why she had the marks on her arm. He tried to take her phone. She didn't let him. I sat with that for a while. She's been trying to save him for 2 years, Carol said softly. She's spent $40,000 of her own money trying to save our son. She has called specialists at 11 o'clock at night. She has sat in waiting rooms at places I couldn't find on a map. She has not slept properly in longer than I can remember her sleeping properly. And she has done all of it alone because her voice caught. Because the 2 people who should have been standing beside her decided a long time ago who she was and stopped looking. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. She called the police, Carol said. Not to punish him. Not out of anger. She called them because she didn't know what else to do, and because she was scared, and because on that particular morning, she was out of road. She looked at me. "That is not what a cold woman does, Robert. That is what a desperate woman does. A woman who loves him enough to do the hard thing when the easy thing would have been to just open the door and let him go." I drove back to Dayton the next morning. I want to tell you I had a speech ready. I want to tell you I had found the right words somewhere on the hour-long drive up 70 East, something adequate, something equal to what I needed to say. I didn't. I sat in their driveway for 10 minutes, and I did not have words. I had just the facts of what I had done and who I had been sitting in my chest like stones. Serena opened the door before I knocked. She had been watching from the window, or she had simply heard my truck. She stood in the doorway, and she waited. "My son married a good woman," I said. She looked at me. She didn't say anything. "I decided what you were 4 years ago," I said. "I decided you were calculating and cold and after something. And every time you did something that contradicted, that I found a way to make it fit anyway. The polished exterior, the answers for everything, all of it. I made it evidence of the thing I'd already decided, and I never once looked underneath." She crossed her arms over her chest, not defensive, more like she was holding herself together. "What you've been doing for him," I said. "What you've been paying, what you've been trying, doing it all alone for 2 years when you had every reason to walk away. That is not the behavior of the woman I decided you were." I stopped, started again. "You did not get a fair chance from me, not once. And everything that was hard about these last 2 years, the part where you were doing this alone, that is partly because of me. Because if you'd had us, you wouldn't have been alone." She looked away toward the maple tree in the front yard. The leaves had come down mostly in the last few days. The branches were bare. "I don't need an apology," she said quietly. "I need Ethan to get better. I need him to stay in the program this time." "He will," I said. Then I stopped myself. I don't know that. I want that to be true. What I know is that this time, he won't be doing it without me. She looked back at me me. For a long moment her face was unreadable, and then something behind her eyes shifted, something guarded giving way to something exhausted and genuine. "He's at the intake appointment right now," she said. "The residential one. 30 days. She unfolded her arms. "He agreed to go on his own, yesterday morning." "That's good," I said. "It's a start," she said. She stepped back from the door. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make coffee. I want to tell you that what came after was simple." It was not. 30 days at a residential facility does not fix what years of addiction have quietly dismantled. Ethan came home thinner, calmer, with a schedule of outpatient sessions and a sponsor whose number was saved in his phone. He was fragile in a way I had never allowed myself to see him be fragile before, and learning to stand next to that fragility without trying to fix it or fortify it into something stronger was the hardest thing I have done since I stopped fighting fires. The first Sunday he was home, we sat in the backyard, just the two of us. Serena had gone to the grocery store, giving us the space she was always quietly creating for things that needed room. "I knew what you thought of her," Ethan said. He was looking at the fence, not at me. "From the beginning, I knew." "I know you did," I said. "I let you think it," he said. "I didn't correct you. It was easier. If you were focused on her, you weren't focused on me." I thought about what Serena had said. "He knew what you thought of me, and he knew what you thought of him." "She never asked me to," he said. "She never once asked me to defend her to you. She just kept showing up for us anyway." His voice was rough. "I don't deserve her." "No," I said. "But she chose you. So you'd better become the kind of man who deserves her." He looked at me then. For a second, he looked exactly like the 7-year-old who used to fall asleep in the back seat on the way home from his grandmother's house. And I felt the whole weight of what I'd been carrying for 36 years in the shape of loving him and not knowing how to show it without making it into a lesson. "I'm sorry I made it harder," I said. "For both of you." He nodded once. We sat with that for a while. the way men sit with things they don't have enough language for. It was not comfortable. It was honest, which is not always the same thing. Carol drove up on Ethan's first full weekend home. She and Serena sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours, while Ethan and I raked the leaves in the backyard. I don't know what they talked about. Some debts between women don't get paid off in an afternoon and don't need an audience. Margaret O'Shea came over that evening with a casserole and a bottle of wine. She sat with all of us in the living room, and she didn't ask anyone how they were feeling or what the plan was or when things would be back to normal. She had been an ER nurse for 32 years. She understood better than most of us that normal doesn't come back. You build something new where it used to be, and if you're lucky and you work at it, the new thing is stronger than what it replaced. 3 months later, Ethan stood up at a family group meeting at the outpatient center and talked for 8 minutes about what addiction had cost him and what it had taken from the people around him. He talked about Serena. He talked about his mother. Near the end, he looked at me and he said that the person he had been most afraid to tell had turned out to be the most important person to tell, and that he wished he had told him sooner, and that the silence had cost everyone more than the truth would have. I looked at my son, standing up there under the fluorescent lights, with his hands shaking slightly, and his voice steady. And I thought about 31 years of walking into burning buildings, all the fires I had been so certain I knew how to read from the outside. I had been wrong about the most important one. Serena was sitting next to me. She was watching Ethan with the expression of someone who is watching something they fought very hard for and almost didn't survive fighting for, and it is finally beginning to hold. I leaned toward her slightly. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for not giving up on him." She didn't look away from Ethan, but I saw the corner of her mouth move. "That's what you do," she said, "for someone you love." I drove home to Columbus that night with Carol in the passenger seat beside me and the highway nearly empty. She was almost asleep, her head against the window. The lights of the passing towns came and went. I have spent most of my life believing that strength means certainty, that a man who knows his own mind, who makes his decisions and stands behind them, who doesn't waver and doesn't show softness, is a strong man. I taught my son that, or I tried to. I see now what that lesson cost him, what it cost all of us. The strongest person in that house for 2 years was the woman I had decided was calculating and cold. The woman who paid $40,000 out of her own pocket without telling a soul. The woman who called 911 when she was terrified because she loved my son enough to do the thing that might make him hate her if it saved his life. The woman who made coffee for his father when his father came to her door with 30 years of wrong decisions behind him and barely an apology to show for it. My son is 9 months sober as I write this. He goes to meetings on Tuesday nights. Serena goes with him sometimes. Sometimes I go. Last month, the 3 of them, Ethan and Serena and Carol, set up a small fund through Ethan's outpatient center to help families who can't afford the kind of care that Serena spent 2 years paying for on her own. They named it quietly, nothing showy, just a line item in the center's budget. When the director called to thank us, she said something I've been turning over ever since. She said most families don't find their way back. She said the ones who do usually have one person in them who refuses to let go, even when letting go would be the easier choice. I know who that person was in our family. I was not that person. I was the one standing on the front walk, full of certainty, about to knock on the wrong door. I was the one who needed an old nurse in house slippers to stop me and tell me to wait. I am grateful she did. I am grateful every day that someone told me to stop before I walked through that door the wrong way. because the truth on the other side of it was not the truth I was carrying. And if I had gone in there with that truth, hard and practiced, and 20 years old, I would have broken something the rest of us have spent 9 months learning how to hold together. Before you listen to someone else's story, make sure you have done the harder thing first, which is listening to your own assumptions and asking them what they are afraid you'll find out. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from today. And if you have ever had to unlearn something you were certain of, something that cost the people around you before it cost you, I want to hear about it. Like this video and subscribe if you believe that the truth is always worth the trouble of finding it, even when you are the last person to arrive at it. Because sometimes the most important door you will ever open is the one you almost walked through wrong.